Yes, let's do this! WandaVision is finally on. Let's see what the next stage of Wanda's character development is gonna look like.
8:01 p.m.
What? What? Are you serious? This is... Whoa, okay. This is way too much thinking right now. So much to unpack right now that... Oh. So this is what it's like to have a video not age well. So, a little explanation. A few months ago, I did a video on Our Lady in Red to discuss how she responded to the many traumatic experiences that she's gone through, and how she was able to pull through it and become the hero we all know. Well, clearly someone spoke too soon, because our girl did not recover from losing her loved ones. So much so that she kidnapped an entire city and brainwashed them into characters in her own personal sitcom. Yeah, that's totally what a well-adjusted person would do after a personal tragedy. It's only natural that this all happened the way it did. This is pure self-care all the way. So although Wanda may have recovered from some of her past pain, what happened during the events of Infinity War were just too fresh, and she was still reeling from the loss of Vision. And with Cap and Hawkeye gone living their lives, she was left alone, which led to the Westview incident. So this video is going to be a follow-up to my original episode on Wanda. This time, instead of focusing on how she overcame her loss, we're gonna dig into how she did the exact opposite of that in WandaVision. What can Wanda teach us about how not to overcome loss? I'm the guidance guy, and just like one of Wanda's favorite sitcom characters, your internet school counselor has some explaining to do. And if you didn't get that joke, go look it up. Educate yourself, people, come on. Except for perhaps the nerdiest of us, most people didn't know what to expect from WandaVision when we first saw the trailers. It had something to do with old sitcoms and Vision was back somehow. And when we saw the first few episodes, some people just couldn't get behind the I Love Lucy aesthetic that WandaVision was going for. Which to those people, I must say, I feel sorry for you. The commitment of not just simply doing a parody of old style sitcoms, but to replicate it so well? Hate on it all you want, but that was quality stuff right there. But as the show went on and we saw various parts of the MCU come back and interact with each other, we began to unravel the fantasy world that Ms. Maximoff created for herself. And we eventually discovered that the town of Westview and its citizens were simply playing a role in Wanda's attempts to recover from losing the one that she loved the most. And despite the supernatural elements involved in all this, the Scarlet Witch's plan isn't quite as far-fetched as you'd think. Yeah, the exact actions she took are not in the realm of possibility for us, but the intentions behind the actions that Wanda took in processing her grief and pain are what we can all gain from. So what exactly did Red do that we all need to be careful of if we find ourselves in a season of grief? Get ready, because there's a lot going on there. But before we can get diving into Wanda's reaction to grief, we need to see just how grief manifests in our lives and how it can impact us. The first thing we need to realize is that there are different types of grief. We tend to believe that all loss is created equal, but that is far from the truth. The website, What's Your Grief, goes into detail about the many types of grief, and the version that we experience is based on different factors. There's anticipatory grief that can occur when someone has passed away after a long battle with a terminal illness. Masked grief is a more repressed kind of mourning in which the person is holding back their pain. And in Ruby's case, she's experienced traumatic grief, which occurs when losing someone after a sudden and unexpected way. Remember, the original plan wasn't to destroy Vision in order to stop Thanos, but in the desperation of the battle, it was the only option. But not only did Wanda have to destroy Vision herself, she had to watch as he was brought back to life again, only to be destroyed a second time. That's not something you just get over, because with traumatic grief, it's a two-edged struggle. There's dealing with the loss, as well as the event that caused the loss in the first place. Because at its core, grief is about the loss of a connection. Be it a person, place, event, or synthetic life form in this situation, the mourning process is coming to terms with the fact that an attachment that we have made in this life is no longer with us. And that's what makes grief so painful. Admitting that, and then learning to live a life in which such a vital member of it just isn't there anymore. And of course, grief has no timeline. It's not like the flu where you can just get over it and you'll be fine after a week or two. Depending on the situation, it can take years to fully go through the grieving process. And as long as you're being honest with your experience and your emotions, that's okay. Don't suppress those feelings. Don't force yourself into a timeline that doesn't give you enough time to fully absorb the impact of that loss. If you need to cry, cry. If talking with someone helps, don't deny yourself. I put a link in the description to some various resources in case you're in that situation. And now that we've taken a look at how grief works and how to handle it, let's see how Wanda, well, didn't do any of that. Who knew that the first post-game MCU TV series was going to end up being a massive tutorial on how not to grieve? But that's what we got here in WandaVision. And in giving the Scarlet Witch the spotlight, we not only see how she was brought to the point of creating TV Land City, but the grand lengths that she took to maintain and ultimately have to let go of the false reality she created. And as the show goes on, we're forced to grapple with the fact that even though we understand why Wanda's doing what she's doing, we know what she's doing is wrong and she's going about trying to do a good thing in the wrong way. So let's dig deeper into not just her actions, but the motivation behind the actions and why Crimson's strategy for emotional pain management needed a serious revision. The first and most obvious action Wanda takes in dealing with her pain is that she clings to the past. And I'm gonna say it now just in case you've made it to this point already, but spoiler alert, we eventually discover just why Crimson decided to transform a whole town into an homage to an entire genre of television. During Wanda's grief counseling session with her best neighbor Agatha, we discovered that her favorite pastime with her family was watching these old-timey comedies, and it was while they were watching one of them that she ended up losing her family. Ignoring the retcon of how her parents died, the event of losing your family suddenly, especially at a young age, will impact you as you get older and can have devastating negative impacts on you as well. The stress that comes from experiencing and attempting to process such an event, the temptation of maladapting coping strategies, and even the development of the brain can all be factors for children who go through such traumatic events. But Wanda was able to channel that loss into productivity and purpose by protesting against the chaos going on in her home country. And as we know, that wasn't the only loss that she had to deal with. Later on, she had to come to terms with the loss of the OG Pietro at the hands of Ultron, and Vision played a major role in helping our hero recover from that sudden event. But after the events of Infinity War and Endgame, after losing Vision to the hands of Thanos, Wanda had reached her limit. She wanted to return to a time before all the pain, all the loss that she experienced in her life, and the Westview incident was her attempt to create a space for herself away from all of that, not just for herself, but for her lost love. She created a world that not just reflected the past, but she attempts to recreate the past by bringing Vision back. And though we don't have the ability to wind back the clock to a more favorable time, we may be tempted to stay in the past in other ways. We may become obsessed with the past and only see the good parts of yesterday instead of the whole picture. We can become afraid of the future, fearful of any kind of change. Wanda lived through that. She could care less about what the future looked like because to her it could never compare to the past that was so violently stolen from her. And it was her obsession with recreating the past that led to her next misstep. She chose to escape instead of confront. You'll notice that the Westview incident didn't happen in New York or Chicago or any other big-time city where anyone would notice what was going on within seconds. Nah, she chose some quiet suburban town in the outskirts of Jersey. And it's not like she told anyone what she was gonna do either. She didn't go chat with Hawkeye or Old Man Cap about it before she created the Hex. She did this all on her own, and she did it all as a means to escape. Now, we all need a getaway every once in a while. Trust, in the world that we're in right now, the importance of breaking away from the grind and getting some time off is perhaps more important now than ever. But there's a difference between the occasional vacation and what we see from our Magic Lady. What she's doing is engaging in a very toxic version of escapism. She's literally running away from the dark realities of the Infinity War, the snap, and the fallout from it all to create her own reality in which those events have no effect on her. And when you're going through any tough time, you can't afford to deny reality. Whatever happened, happened. Pretending it didn't happen, living in denial and distracting yourself from life as you know it are all forms of escape that can become a substitute for dealing with our pain. And we do this because avoiding the pain is much easier than taking it on. Let's face it, pain isn't fun, discomfort is uncomfortable. But in order to progress past pain, we must not allow ourselves to become entrenched in our desire for ease. Doing that could mean getting professional help, or even something as simple as taking a walk by yourself or actually allowing yourself to truly feel your emotions about a particular event. And if you find yourself having trouble with that part, bring someone along on your journey. In Wanda's case, she didn't have to face the truth alone. Monica was more than willing to help out by telling her that she was available. And even though Red didn't go that route, she ultimately looked to Vision, the boys, and even Agatha to lend a hand. And what's truly interesting about Scarlet's situation is that in her grief, she took what are often two very different approaches. Yes, she tried to escape her trauma, but she also tried to control her situation. I don't think I have to go into too much detail to explain that one. When you're able to completely suppress someone's personality and replace it with that of a stock sitcom character and then transform the town into whatever era of TV comedy you want to parody that week, yeah, that's next level control freak right there. And minus the magical powers, there's something that we can see in our own lives. In some cases, people who have experienced loss and trauma respond to those events by trying to take back control over their lives. It can show in small ways, like suddenly becoming focused on cleaning your home, or it can go into Finding Nemo territory where someone can be obsessed with doing everything in their power to prevent a bad situation from ever happening again. And you can't deny that's exactly what Maximoff did. Her desire for control was so strong that she recreated her boyfriend from scratch. Now, we can debate the ethics of rebuilding sentient life after it's been destroyed another time, but can someone explain to me how Tommy and Billy got to be? Was it a when a man robot and a woman love each other very much situation, or did she just magic herself some kids? Help me understand that in the comments, but I'm getting sidetracked here. We should want a measure of control in our lives. No one should want every little detail of their lives dictated for them, because we all strive for some level of independence. Shoot, even babies do that, and they're completely helpless. But the harsh truth is that we all need to acknowledge is that as much as we try, we don't have that much control over what happens to us. Plans change, people change, we change, and those fluctuations can cause consequences that we had no idea could happen. Life is unpredictable, and any attempt to try to grab all the control is a fool's errand. Because even Wanda's attempt to play God didn't work. She had no idea that Agatha was pulling her own strings in the Maximoff puppet show that she was running. She couldn't control what Sword was doing outside the Hex. And at some points, Wanda had difficulty controlling her own powers, which were required to keep the whole thing going. And here's the ultimate problem when trying to take all the control as a response to loss. It can lead you to saying goodbye all over again. If we go to the end of WandaVision, Ruby ends up bidding farewell to not just the world that she created, but to the family that she made. This all leads her exactly where she was at the beginning of the series, alone. Her excessive need for control in order to never be left alone again was a direct cause of her being left alone again. And for us, unbalanced control can have the same effect. It can end up looking like self-sabotage in the long run. The effort it takes to grasp for control over things you ultimately don't have any in will only lead to a house of cards situation. It doesn't take much for the whole structure to fall apart. We saw it happen with Wanda, and the same thing can happen to us. We need to handle our business and control what we can. I'm not saying just to throw all responsibility and go bump all. This guy ain't saying that. What I'm advocating though is balance. And if your first response to loss is looking for some means to take control of your life, I'm not saying that's a bad thing, because doing so can be a helpful way to cope and is a big part of personal growth. We just need to be careful about how far we take it, lest we create a hex of our own. One that may not brainwash people or create life, but one that's just as fragile and difficult to maintain. At the beginning of WandaVision, the Scarlet Witch was one of the most underrated heroes in the MCU. She had an amazing story, an intriguing personality, and had a lot more power than even she knew. And now that WandaVision is out and done, not only do we get to see what she's really capable of and get a much overdue dive on her backstory, we get to see what happens when we don't take on our grief and loss properly. We end up obsessed with our past, preferring to run away from life instead of taking it on, and grasping for control that on the inside we know we don't really have. But I want to leave you with what can happen when we do move on from the past, accept our limitations, and confront our pain. And it's the same thing that happened to Wanda. We get transformation. We experience the power of knowing what we can control and being okay with it. we experience the strength to overcome challenges and seeing that we're capable of more than what we thought. And we experience freedom to write a new chapter. Like I said in the first Wanda video, progressing past pain doesn't mean forgetting about it or that it never impacts you, but rather it means that those events don't have the ability to keep you down. And as we saw with our powered up witch, when we have that kind of freedom, it opens up a whole universe of possibility. Thanks for watching. Let me know your thoughts in the comments and if you have any stories or characters that you'd want me to look into. And of course, do the YouTube thing. Like, subscribe, and ring that bell. Until next time.